Welcome to another installment of 5-Minute Licks. Last week, we looked at 2 picking exercises that have worked wonders for my playing. So many of you requested some left-hand exercises, so we're going to dive into a sequence and a technical approach that I use to try to minimize the amount of pressure that I play with and to minimize the tension in my left hand when I'm playing legato lines. Here's a quick little musical example of what we're going to talk about. I want you to hammer on from fret 7 to fret 8 of the high E string. Then I want you to hammer on to fret 10. Again, on the high E string, we're going to pick fret 7 every single time. We're going to start out nice and slow, and then we're going to work up a little bit of pace as we go. I want you to do exactly the same thing, just don't pick fret 7 every single time. Maybe pick it every now and then, or only pick it the first time and continue on that sequence. I want you to pay attention to what your first finger's doing, and we're going to talk about it in a second. Now, you would have noticed my first finger kind of flopping around a little bit, and you may have noticed that you're anchoring your first finger on here. What I find is when I anchor my first finger here, it's not necessarily a bad technique, but it does lead to a lot of tension in my wrist and my forearm, and that tension is going to inhibit how fast or how smoothly I can play the lick. Shout out to Tom Quayle, who's not only an incredible legato player, but has a great video called Lazy First Finger Syndrome that opened up my eyes to this particular technique. Now, rather than think about that, what I want to do is turn this lick into a slightly longer sequence, and we want to introduce the idea of a hammer-on from nowhere. I found that just playing that line on a single string and trying to play as fast as possible was, 1, a little bit more challenging than playing the sequence, and 2, it wasn't really something that I wanted to do musically, so I may as well put some time into the sequence. Essentially, we are just going to displace the highest note on the E string. The first 6 notes are fret 7, 8, and 10 on the high E string. It's 7, 8 on the E again, but then a hammer on from nowhere onto fret 10 of the B string. This is really the type of lick that changed the way I approach legato playing. It changed my thinking about it, and it really helped improve my technique. So we get this. Now, before we talk about anything technical, let's get the next 6 notes. It's going to be 7 on the high E, hammer on from nowhere to fret 8 on the B, and then onwards to fret 10 of the B, and then it's 7, 8, 10 on the B string again. Those last 6 notes. I'd encourage you to practice it in those 2 chunks, but when you put it together, you get this, and I actually find it easier to play it fast than it is to play it slow. You'll also notice that I'm kind of using my right hand to mute any of the lowest strings on there so they don't ring out as I'm hammering away on the guitar. So I don't want you to worry about how fast you are playing this. What I want you to think about when you're practicing this is the tension in your first finger. And I want you to practice just holding fret 7 on the high E string and then releasing it. So that's going to be the feeling in your first finger. And the thinking is sort of once you've done that hammer on to fret 8, whatever string it is on, you can release that tension in your first finger a little bit. And then you've got the hammer on to fret 10 again. And then you're kind of triggering back down by pushing the string in to the fret again. That way, for me, it feels like I have more rhythmic control over it, but also it's relieving that tension in your wrist and in your forearm. And if you just have your first finger in your head and you practice this line for a while, you'll be challenged by it, but you'll find that eventually that will start to click. Now, this leads to the second way that I want you to practice the lick, and I stole this from another fantastic player's instructional video. Kiko Loureiro has a video where he talks about minimizing the amount of pressure you're using to actually fret and articulate notes. So what I want you to do is practice that sequence, but use less than the minimum amount of pressure to actually make a note. So everything is going to sound muted. And this musically kind of sounds rubbish, but what you're doing is you're teaching your left hand to basically just kind of float around the string and not worry too much about how hard you have to push in. So this is the first thing, the kind of nonsense part of it. From there, just start to increase how hard you're pushing on the string so that you cross that threshold from a mute into a fully articulated note. And you'll probably find that you hardly have to apply any pressure on there, probably way less than you are using. So you start out muted and you just slowly bring your fingers in until you start articulating those notes. Like the picking exercises that we did last week, I don't think you have to practice these that much. I would try that muted idea where you slowly increase the pressure until you're articulating the notes for maybe 3 or 4 minutes, and then I'd just work on the nitty-gritty of actually mastering that sequence. What I found is that sequence actually just taught me to get my first finger to loosen up a little bit and not press too hard all the time when I'm trying to play legato lines like this. You can, of course, break it down and just practice the first 3 notes on there. Like I kind of said earlier, though, I think musically I would much rather play the longer sequence in there and practice moving it around on the neck. And in doing so, what I found is the flow-on effect is all of my playing, my left hand is way more relaxed. I feel like I can articulate and execute lines that I want to way more consistently on there, and I'm not going to run into the danger of any repetitive stress injuries from playing guitar, because I want to play guitar as long as I'm on this earth, and everything that I can do to make sure that my body is fit and firing is really important for that. Go and have a crack at it now. Let me know what you think in the comments section below. It's a really nice compliment to what we did on the last episode talking about 2 picking exercises. I found that this sequence has worked wonders for my playing, and I hope it can help you out in a similar way. If you like what I'm doing here on the channel, links to my Patreon and the music that I make with my band Ragdoll are in the video description. Go and grab your guitar and practice. I'll see you on the next one.